Okay, so you guys really wanted us to do a deep dive into this whole Enoch Burke situation.
It's certainly a fascinating story.
Yeah, I mean, it really does kind of grab you.
Yeah.
And it just seems like it keeps going and going and going.
Yeah, it does feel like every time you think, okay, that's probably it, there's some new development and we got to dive back in.
It is such a complex case.
It is.
Touching upon so many things that are just very, very relevant, I think, today.
Absolutely.
So for those who haven't been following every single twist and turn,
Yeah.
Enoch Burke, he is a teacher in Ireland.
That's right.
That kind of found himself at the center of a storm, shall we say.
At the center of a controversy, yeah.
Yeah, and it all started at this Wilson's Hospital School.
Right, a secondary school where he was employed as a teacher.
Exactly.
And I guess the incident that really sparked all of this is when he refused to use a transgender student's preferred name and pronouns.
Right, and he has said that this is, a matter of conscience.
Right.
So
This is a deeply held belief.
Stemming from his Christian beliefs.
Exactly.
And so it's interesting because it's not a case of like disagreeing with someone's identity.
Right.
It's that he is saying that this, goes against certain biblical passages inform his understanding of gender.
Right. And that to go against them would be to violate his own personal faith.
Okay, so we're talking about a situation where somebody feels their religious beliefs are in conflict with what the school is saying.
With the policies of the school.
And the school, of course, is saying, we have a responsibility
Exactly.
to create a welcoming environment for all students.
And an inclusive environment, right?
Including transgender students.
Exactly. And so you have this kind of head-on collision between these two different sets of values and priorities.
So what happens next?
Well, the school decides to suspend Enoch.
Okay.
And they saw his refusal to use the student's preferred name and pronouns as a potential act of discrimination, which would violate the school's policies aimed at protecting transgender students from harassment or exclusion.
Right.
But Enoch didn't simply accept the suspension. He continued to show up at the school,
Wow.
arguing that he was being punished for his beliefs.
So it escalated quickly.
It escalated very quickly.
This was no longer a disagreement. It's almost a form of defiance.
It is a form of defiance, yeah. And his continued presence at the school actually started disrupting the learning environment.
Right.
To the point where the school had to seek a court injunction.
Oh, wow.
Which would bar him from even being on the school grounds.
So a court injunction that's a legal order.
Yes, that's right.
To compel somebody to do something.
That's right. Or to refrain from doing something.
Right. So in this case, to stay away.
Exactly. To stay away from the school.
But he defies that too.
He defies that too.
Oh, wow.
And this is what ultimately leads to his imprisonment.
Wow.
For contempt of court.
So that's basically just directly disobeying a court order.
Exactly. So, it's not simply holding a different belief at this point. It's now he's breaking the law.
Right. And so he ends up in jail, not for his initial stance, but for defying that court order.
Exactly.
I mean, this must have just blown up in the news.
Oh, it became huge. It became international news.
Yeah.
And opinions were really divided. You had people who viewed Enoch as sort of a martyr for religious freedom.
Right.
As someone who is standing up to what they saw as maybe an overreaching secular agenda.
Right.
On the other side, you had folks who were really concerned that his actions were actually harming the transgender student in question.
Yeah.
That this was a case of discrimination.
Right, and creating an unsafe space.
Exactly.
For everybody involved.
For that particular student, but also for the broader school community.
So it really became this flashpoint.
It did, for all these bigger societal debates.
And this case actually went even further, right?
It did.
Enoch was later dismissed from his position.
Right.
For gross misconduct.
Which essentially means that he was in serious violation of the standards that were expected of him as a teacher.
Right, and this was largely due to his repeatedly defying the court order and disrupting the school environment.
Exactly. The court found that his actions amounted to gross misconduct, and so the school was within its rights to dismiss him.
So he's dismissed from the school, but then even after this, he continued to challenge the school legally.
Right. He continued to appeal his dismissal.
And the crazy thing to me is he was still receiving his salary while doing so.
Right. So that added another layer of controversy to the whole case.
Yeah. So it's interesting because, throughout all of this, Enoch has maintained that he is simply upholding his right to freedom of speech and religion.
That's right.
And that these freedoms are being eroded in modern society. And he would often cite specific passages from the Bible to kind of support these views.
Yes. He would very frequently bring up passages from Scripture.
So it's not just some abstract debate for him. It's like he's actually living this out.
Exactly. This is how he sees the world, and this is how he believes he has to act based on his understanding of his faith.
But at the same time, we have to acknowledge that his actions had a real impact on the student involved.
On the transgender student right at the heart of all of this.
Yes.
Critics of Enoch argue that refusing to acknowledge someone's gender identity, it can have a really detrimental impact on their well-being. It can make them feel invalidated, unsafe, and really ostracized within the school community.
And it's so interesting because this is the real crux of it.
Right.
It's like, how do we protect individual freedoms while also making sure we're creating a just and inclusive society where everybody feels respected
and safe, right?
Yes.
So, that's the million-euro question here, isn't it? And it's something that's happening not just at this particular school, but all around the world.
Absolutely.
I mean, this is a conversation that is happening in communities large and small.
Yeah, and even in your own personal life.
Exactly.
Everybody's wrestling with this.
Yeah, how do we balance these different competing values?
So as you think about this case and all the different nuances to it, here's a thought to kind of keep in mind as you discuss this with your friends or your family. How do we balance these individual rights with this responsibility to create a society where everybody feels a sense of belonging and respect?
Right, because, it's not enough to just say, oh, well, I have my rights and that's it.
Right.
We also have to think about, what kind of society are we building? What kind of world are we creating? And how are our actions impacting the people around us?
Yeah, it's a really tough question.
It is.
There are no easy answers.
There aren't.
But having an open and respectful dialogue, I think, is the first step.
I think that's the key. Yeah. Having these conversations, even when they're difficult,
absolutely,
is the only way we're going to figure out how to move forward together.
Couldn't agree more.
Yep.
Okay, well, that is it for this deep dive.
Until next time.
Thanks for listening.